Well, Democrats' predictions for Operation Epic Fury remind me of all their other doomsday scenarios. Remember, they predicted that tariffs would have a horrific impact on our economy. They did not. They said that America would rise up against ICE and deportations. No, they didn't. And globalists said that China's economy would shrug off tariffs and was unstoppable. Well, they were wrong. It's already slowing. And now many of these same people seem to be wish-casting that Operation Epic Fury can't work because Trump's team is lame.
I'm thinking you could pick a random group of people off the street tonight here in Washington, D.C., just a random group, and they could probably do a better job than our government is doing right now with this.
Doomsdayers wrong again. Oh, really, Senator? And how did Biden's crew do with its managed containment of Iran? That's what they called it. Well, I'll tell you what happened. Things went in reverse under Biden. They failed diplomatically. They failed to revive their old 2015 nuclear deal that Trump smartly pulled us out of. Sanctions didn't do the trick. And Iran, meanwhile, approached nuclear threshold status. Well, but they sure talked a lot.
We'll continue to work together to confront and counter the dangerous and destabilizing influence of Iran. As President Biden's made clear, the United States is committed to preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Iran is a threat not only to Israel and the region, but increasingly to the world.
Well, that was all talk and, of course, no action. Biden's Iran strategy, turns out it was no strategy at all, as Politico even noted in 2024. The truth is, our military's primary objective, eliminating Iran's nuclear program, eliminating Iranian ballistic missiles and future production, and eliminating their interceptors, taking out their Navy. Well, I agree. All those objectives, I agree with Senator Kennedy. Trump has already won in Iran.
We've already won. We will eventually leave Iran after having destroyed their renewed efforts to develop a nuclear weapon, after having destroyed their missile arsenal, after having destroyed their missile launches, after having destroyed their Navy, and the good people of Persia will now have an opportunity to pick their own leadership.
It's their opportunity. At this point, across a plethora of issues, Democrats are not trying really to get the policy right for the right outcome. When you examine it issue by issue, they're just trying to get us to give up. They want us to believe that open borders, a weakened America, a dominant China, and yet even a few days ago in nuclear Iran, that was all inevitable. And many others on the harder left believe that we deserve what's coming to us. After all, we're living on stolen land. Well, given the absolute lack of real growth and a security agenda for the Democrats, to win now, they need to hope that financial markets crater, that energy prices go up and stay up, and that Operation Epic Fury becomes a quagmire. That's a horrible political position to be in. It's cynical and it's pessimistic. President Trump, on the other hand, he's an optimist. He thinks America's best is still, yes, yet to come. But only if he addresses the big problems left in his lap. The influx of illegals, the offshoring of our industrial base, and now the menace in the Middle East. This is all a very heavy lift and very risky. But Trump believes the risk is worth it, and that the only way to keep us free is to be innovative, bold, and relentless as we eliminate lingering threats and grow our prosperity. Joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us, Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick. Senator, it's great to see you tonight. You also served in Iraq during the Gulf War. Republicans are holding firm with the president, it looks like, and I know polls are kind of hard to read, but it looks like the base of the Republican Party seems to be holding strong with Donald Trump. What about your colleague's point that in all real ways, Trump has already won this conflict, and at this point, it's kind of a cleanup mission?
Well, first, I think it's absolutely within the president's authority to do what he's done to combat an imminent threat from Iran. And when people say there's not clear objectives, I don't really understand what they mean. He's been incredibly clear. destroy the ballistic missiles, destroy the launchers, destroy the manufacturing ability, destroy the Navy, and ensure that Iran has no path to a nuclear weapon. That couldn't be more clear, and we are well on the way to doing that, but we need to finish the job. We need to ensure that when the military operations stop, that Iran's capacity to use those weapons against our allies, against American forces, is gone. There's no regime in the world that has more blood on its hands than Iran's, killed more Americans than Iran. And this is the moment to defang Iran and lay the groundwork for the Iranian people to dictate their own future.
The president today said that if the supreme leader's son is the one they kind of put up to take over for him, that's, quote, not acceptable. But if America is going to be perceived to be placing a new leader of Iran in a position of authority there, is that not regime change? And did President Trump not campaign against regime change? Because that's a step further than destroying their nuke and missile capacity.
Well, listen, I think we're all scarred by 20 years of war in Iraq. I certainly am. And I think what the American people don't want is entanglements where we're stuck for months or many years in Iran. And I think there's no possibility of that. I think the regime could go a number of different ways. We've got to have a leader in there that's not going to be hostile to the United States, whether that's someone within the existing regime or whether that's an entirely new regime. We have to have leadership that is going to recognize that they can't be a source of terrorism and a source of killing or threatening Americans or our allies in the region. And they have to give up any ambition for a nuclear weapon. That might be somebody within. I think it's highly unlikely that the Ayatollah's son is someone who's going to be able to represent those views, but there may be someone within the current regime that could. And I think the president is open-minded to that, and he's made it clear that it's in the hands of the Iranian people to dictate their future.
And what if the Iranian people choose the son of the supreme leader? Are we going to veto that?
Well, if the son of... Well, I think what we're going to do is ensure that Iran cannot have the capacity to hurt us. We have to achieve those military objectives. After that, I think there's lots of different possibilities. I suspect the president has no ambition to get in the middle of Iran's politics and future on an ongoing basis. But we may need to help early on to ensure that we get off on the right path.
Senator, the foreign minister of Iran had a message for America today, making a lot of headlines. Let's watch.
Are you afraid of a U.S. invasion in your country?
No, we are waiting for them because we are confident that we can confront them, and that would be a big disaster for them. We were ready for this war even more than the previous war.
Araghchi is one of the few of the senior leadership who seems to be regularly appearing on television and alive, but he said, we're ready and look out.
Well, the last 50 guys that we just killed were equally belligerent. And I think the bottom line here is that the military objectives are clear, and we need to keep at it. We don't need boots on the ground in any sort of large-scale invasion to achieve those objectives. Our military capability is incredibly pristine, and we've got air control in the airspace, and we're now on hunting missions to make sure that we accomplish the military goals the president's laid out.
Senator, great to see you. Thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.